All right, so today is lesson 8 called the eighth note, and it's actually the last lesson in unit 1, which is staffs, clefs, and notes. So the next unit will actually be unit 2, rhythm, and we're going to, by the end of that unit, hopefully be actually decoding rhythms on the page. So this foundation laying of sort of learning the ABCs of music reading, we're almost there. We're almost at the end, and then we can get started on actually starting to decode. All right, so again, review time. We remember that we know that music is written on a staff that consists of 5 lines and 4 spaces that we count from the bottom up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And we also remember that we could write a half note, let's say, on space 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd want to draw then a stem going down on its left side. We could also write a whole note on line 3. We'd want to make sure it was centered over line 3. We could write a quarter note on space 1, and we'd want to make sure that our stem was going up and on the right side. And we could write another whole note on space 3. All right, and we're just going to review also that we learned about 2 kinds of clefs. The treble clef, or G clef, was the first clef we learned about. This will usually be found the leftmost side of the staff, and it's used to decode the note heads we're going to see and assign specific pitches to them. So a treble clef begins on line 2, bumps up to line 3, down to line 1, up and around, back down again. Remember that all this curlicue action here helps us know that X marks the spot, and if we were to put a note head right there on line 2, that note would be a G. From there we could assign all the other note heads a specific pitch that we would play or sing. Remember again, this is called the treble clef, used for higher female voices or for higher instruments like violin, piccolo, flute, oboe, clarinet, trumpet, and the right hand of the piano. Or the G clef, we can call this, because it helps us to know, embedded in it is a code that helps us to know that this note on the second line is going to be the G. And then we also learned about a bass clef used for the left hand of the piano, also for instruments like the cello, a lot of the brass instruments, right? So lower, and men's voices, lower pitches. We start that bass clef on line 4, bump up to line 5, half a heart, and stop around line 2. And then we have a dot next to it, 1 in space 4, 1 in space 3. And these dots help us know that line 4 is a very special line because it is an F. And from there we can figure out all the other pitches. So we remember again, this is called the bass clef or the F clef. All right, and once again today we're going to just draw through from memory our note value pyramid together. Grab a scrap of paper if you have it available and give this a try. So we remember our longest note value is going to be a whole note, and we're going to skip the pi thing today. This is a whole note, just an open note head. We add 1 written element to that, 1 symbolic element. That's going to be a stem. And these are going to be half notes. And each of these notes will be worth exactly half of the value or half of the duration of a whole note. We can take these half notes and break them into 2 equal parts. We're just going to show that by filling in that open note head. And each of these notes would be called a quarter note because they are worth a quarter of the duration of a whole note, or a quarter of the value of a whole note. Note that then 2 of them would be equal to a half note, right? Just like 2/4 of a pie is equal to half a pie. Okay, we can take those quarter notes, we can split those into 2 equal parts, and we show this just by adding either a flag, I'll just show that over here, if we have a single 1/8 note, a flag, or we can beam them together, basically just connect those flags, but always only one beam or one flag. Okay, and these are called 1/8 notes because each of them will be assigned just an 1/8 of the value, or will represent just an 1/8 of the value or an 1/8 of the duration of a whole note. They should only be held for an 1/8 of the duration that the whole note will be held for. All right, and then we can take each of these groups of 1/8 notes, which is really, each of these 1/8 notes themselves can be broken into 2 equal parts. We often end up grouping these notes together because they're quick. They don't last very long because they're 16th notes worth only a 16th of the duration of an 1/8 note. And you notice we've added the extra beam or one extra flag compared to an 1/8 note, right? So the more notation elements you see on any given note value, remember, the shorter it's going to be. The longest is just a basic open note head. Okay, so then we have 16th notes. And each of these 16th notes will just get 1/16 of the duration of a whole note. Okay, and we're going to reinforce again that the only information we can glean from a note value pyramid like this, or from these note value symbols, the whole note, the half note, the quarter note, the 1/8 note, the 16th note, when they are not on a score that a composer has added additional decoding information to, the only information we can glean from them is their fixed relative value, not any specific number of beats that are assigned them, not any specific duration. So we can know for certain that a whole note, is always going to be worth twice as much as a half note. A half note will always be worth twice as much as a quarter note, and a quarter note will always be worth twice as much as an 1/8 note. An 1/8 note will always be worth twice as much as a 16th note. All right, so we're on to lesson 8, the 1/8 note, which is the last lesson in this unit. It's exciting stuff. Next, we move on to rhythm. So an 1/8 note looks like this. So we have a filled in note head, we have a stem, and then we have a flag that drapes down if we draw it nicely. 2 1/8 notes equal 1 quarter note, and an 1/8 note lasts half as long as a quarter note, or it has half the duration of a quarter note. Again, we have this ruler kind of thing happening. That's one way of visualizing it. So again, if we think of like an 1/8 note being worth 1 inch, then a quarter note, is 2 inches. So to draw an 1/8 note, begin by drawing a quarter note. So there's our step 1. Notice the stems, if it's going up, is on the right side. Then add a curved line to the top of the stem like this. This curved line is called a flag. It looks a little like a flag hanging on a flagpole, don't you think? So we'll do that. And we start up here and just drape it down. So it says sometimes, like half notes and quarter notes, the stem goes down. Notice the stem is now on the left, but the flag is still on the right side of the stem. So it's kind of always enclosed. Typically, when we draw it by hand, we don't actually connect it the way they are to the note head, but you will see it in scores like that. Okay, so like this. So it's all kind of folded in on itself. Not like this. You'll never see this, even though the stem is correct here, the flag is not. So that's not right. Trace each 1/8 note shown below, then draw 3 more 1/8 notes to the right of each one you trace. So again, filled in note head. Now we have a quarter note, and then we're going to trace the flag. Now we have an 1/8 note, right? So filled in note head, stem to the right and up, flag. Filled in note head, stem up and to the right, flag. Filled in note head, stem up and on the right, flag. Flag is on the right side there, but here, when our stem is down and on the left side, we still put the flag on the right side. So down on the left side, flag on the right side. Filled in note head, stem on the left side and down, flag on the right side. Filled in note head, stem on the left and down, flag on the right side. Eighth notes look like this on a staff, just like half notes and quarter notes. All eighth notes below the third line have the stem going up, and all eighth notes on or above the third line have the stem going down. And we already talked about the exceptions, but generally this is true. All right, so our final page, more on the eighth note and then some review. Draw an eighth note on the line or in the space shown below. Make sure the stems go in the correct direction. So I say in the fourth space, right? And then we'd have the stem going down, left side, and then the little flag. On the third line, 1, 2, 3, and we'll follow their rule of down on the left, and the flag. On the first line, 1, and we centered over the line, remember? And up on the right side, and then down on the right side. On the second line, so 1, 2, and again, we're going to go up on the right side, and the flag. And then in the third space, 1, 2, 3, down on the left side, and then the flag. On which line or in which space have these eighth notes been placed? So we have 1, 2, space 2. Then we have a space 1 note. Notice how they're really nicely centered, so it's very easy to read them. It's tricky when they're not correctly placed. And then 1, 2, 3, line 3. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be line 4. Sometimes 2, 3, or 4 eighth notes are written together like this, or like this, or like this. Doesn't matter. You notice the consistent thing is they all only have one beam. There's more notes connected together, but they're still sharing only the one beam. The line that connects the eighth notes is called a beam. We've already discussed that. Add the stems to these eighth notes and connect them with a beam. Okay, so here, connect these 3, then we're going to connect these 2. And again, we haven't quite learned the rules, for we're not able to quite yet, but you'll notice they slant down in line with the notes themselves, right? So that is how you'll see them generally. Here, though, we're going to want to just kind of even them out. And you'll want them to, the beam itself will be straight. So you wouldn't follow the note pitches like this and make the beam do that, okay? So you just kind of even them out like that, sorry. And then, here we go. And now, I bet you can even figure out what pitch this should be. Notice it's on line 2, and here's our treble clef. Right? So we can already know, some of you, of course, you would have known this already a long time ago, but for those of you who are just really, truly learning right now, you already know this is actually a G. You could decode that. So connect these 3. These are going to go down. And they have purposely not given us any where there are some notes below line 3 and some above, but that does happen when you have to beam them. And again, then majority rules. That's how you decide that. All right, this is it for today. See you next lesson to get started on Unit 2, Rhythm.